but they were jellyfish. So I thought it'd be cool if one of the first creatures you saw was made from the life threads of a jellyfish. And of course, this is one of my favorite awesome ones that Keith did of a lupine tiger-esque, half wolf, half tiger that they used to try to scare the recruits with. And this looks like, this is what I call Keith's Victorian manga style. Because it's very detailed, like a Victorian illustration. You've got the caption, you've got the spillover from the frame. Almost all of them spill out of the frame. And, but at the same time, the characters kind of look a little bit like manga characters, like Darren up there. Now, of course, the most famous creature that he created for this book was the Leviathan itself, made from the life threads of a whale, 1,000 feet long, basically a zeppelin, but living. And that's Darren on her ascender right down there to show you how big the Leviathan is. This is the first time she sees it. But the first time I saw it, it looked like this over here. And it had all this crap on top. So I said to Keith, why the crap on top? And he said, well, you're talking about it like it's a ship. You're using naval terminology. I thought it'd be cool if it looked like a ship. And I said, well, the thing is, I wanted it to be smooth on top because I've been looking at pictures of real Zeppelins, and they were actually very smooth on top. And you can imagine being up there. It's almost like being on the wing of a plane. Because if the Zeppelin's going, 80 miles an hour, you're in an 80-mile-an-hour wind. And if you slip and fall down like that guy is about to do, except he's on a rope, you would fall a mile and probably die. So it's such a scary, weird place to be. And there was this awesome story that I heard it was in the South Atlantic in the 1920s. A Zeppelin captain was going along, and he realized he had some damage on the top of the ship. So he sent a group of repair workers up, just like these guys, to fix the damage. Slowed down to 20 miles an hour, so they're only standing at 20-mile-an-hour wind. But they're holding onto the ropes, they're being safe, they're working, it's awesome, and then it starts to rain. Now, the drag about being up there in the rain is it's wet, it's cold, it's a bit slippery, and the biggest problem is that these hatches here automatically close when it's raining so that the water doesn't get inside. So they're stuck up there. They're in the rain, they're holding on the ropes, it sucks. But then it gets worse. The rain got heavier and heavier, and it started to fall so fast that it was building up on the surface of the airship faster than it could run off the back or off the sides. So they wound up building up to an inch of rain. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, right? But an inch of rain times a 1,000-foot-long airship that's 200 feet wide turns out to be about 8 tons of water. So this lighter-than aircraft is now heavier than air, and it starts to push it down lower and lower. It's now just a half a mile high, then a quarter mile, then a few hundred feet, and finally it was 50 feet above the ocean. So the captain had to do something. He's already blown all the ballast. What he decides to do is go faster, because a Zeppelin is just like an airplane. The faster you go, the more lift you get, like when you're taking off. It has a aerodynamic shape. So he's going up faster and faster to create lift, to push against the weight of that water. So he's going 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. And now those guys are standing up there, like holding onto those ropes in a 50-mile-an-hour rain. And then it got worse. As they got closer to the middle of the storm, the ocean waves started to build and get higher and higher, and some as high as 50 feet. So the captain is looking out of his gondola window and seeing waves coming up just as high as he is. And of course, if one of these things hits the ship, it's going to bring them all down and kill everyone, guys on the top, guys on the bottom, everyone. So he has to go still faster. 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour, not knowing if he's already whipped these guys off into the ocean and they're already dead, and one of them was his son. And it was such a cool story. And I said to myself, what it was. And I said to myself, if it looked like this, then you could have a coffee bar up there. And the guys would just all be hanging out at the coffee bar, having fun, saying, ooh, I like the rain. So instead, we made it like this so we could have scenes like this. And this is totally awesome. It's, Darren up on the spine. There's a German airplane attacking. And you can see that for safety's sake, she is attached by a rope to her crewmates. There's ropes there. And that way, if that guy gets shot and starts to slip, she can do something awesome like jump off in the other direction so that her weight counterbalances his. That's a bit of a spoiler, sorry. 5 seconds ago, spoiler warning. Now, those of you who've read my books, like Uglies, Midnighters, Peeps, will know that usually when I get into trouble with a plot, I will have someone jump off something. A hoverboard, a communication tower, a water tower in Oklahoma. Just as long as someone's jumping off something, I'm happy. So that's why I thought it'd be fun to have that lovely flat top to the airship. This is a really cool illustration. It's Regent's Park, and the Leviathan is coming down, and you can see the gondola where the captain is and most of the crew are, and the weird creatures and a bit of London in the background. But I love this down here. There's this crazy story going on with a policeman and a weird creature and maybe a pickpocket and a dude with a monocle popping out, and I have no idea what it is. Because back in the time that Keith is representing here, back in 1914, those illustrators were empowered to do cool things like just make up their own little stories and put them in the background or the foreground. And it is sort of left to you, the reader, to decide what is going on down there, because it's not part of the text. And I love that about that era of illustration. Here's another cool picture from in the insides of the ship. And you can see, Taza is there and these guys, but you can see the spine of the ship even. The spine of the air beast and the ribs, and those are the hydrogen cells, and they're walking down the intestinal tract. So it's a bit smelly, but entirely enjoyable. And one of the things I realized, writing an illustrated novel, it's a different form than a text-only novel. It's a different way of storytelling. So I had to learn these tricks, and one of them is that you have to move your characters around a lot. You have to if I had the same, two characters talking in the same room, like 3 chapters in a row, then Keith would have to draw that room again and again and again, and he would get bored, and you would get bored, and I would get bored. So even if they're just having a conversation, sometimes I'll take them to someplace really awesome and weird and cool, like the inside of the ship. So we've been on the top, we've been on the bottom, looking up from the ground, in the gondola, hanging from the side, even, inside the ship. And as we were working, we realized that really we're just 2 big geeks having fun, and what could be more fun than deck plans? So we made our own deck plans, and these aren't even in the book, right? That's why we could make them in color. And so we said, so these are incredibly detailed files. You can look at the carpets, you can zoom in and see the wallpaper and the light fixtures, and this is where they eat in the captain's cabin, and where they cook the food, and that's the navigation room with a map, and that's the bridge up there at the top. And we did all these different cutaways showing all the different parts of the ships. And then we went insane and started to do more things. Like I wanted to see, what the strafing hawks look like, who chop down enemies' airplanes with their steely talons, and the flechette bats who eat these figs that have spikes in them and then poo them on the enemy. So we did color pictures of them. And then a huge and mighty cutaway of the entire 1,000-foot-long airship. It's like 200 feet of gondola there and 1,000 feet of hydrogen to lift it up. And of course, this is what would happen if you sawed it in half, which you wouldn't want to do. And we just started going mad with all this stuff. And this is a really cool thing. It's a cutaway of the Stormwalker, which is what Alec is running around in. And you can see how crowded it is in there, like how compressed. And when I saw this, I was like, Keith, is it really that small? And he said, well, yeah, that's the way I've been drawing it. That's the way it works. And that's the way you described it. And I was like, well, could we make it bigger now? Because I had all these scenes where they're having these conversations in that tiny little space. And I'm like, I'm going to have to search and replace the word Alec crossed his legs with Alec crossed his eyes. Because there's no room to cross your legs in that thing. And it's another thing I realized is that I would have told you before I started this book, many novelists will tell you, oh yeah, we imagine everything, we have it very well visualized, we know exactly what it looks like. That is a pile of poo, because I had no idea, I don't actually engineer this stuff, I just kind of imagine it. But Keith, because he had to draw it many times from many angles, had to actually engineer the world. He had to actually build it. And there's a cool quote, which something that Joss Whedon says, is that he likes writing TV better than movies. Because when you write a movie, you write the script, then you build the set, then you shoot it, then you tear down the set. But when you write a TV show, You write a few episodes, then you build the sets and start shooting, but then you have to write another 20, 30, 50 episodes. And you have the sets right there, and you can go to them and sit in the couch where your characters are having this argument, or walk around in the sort of graveyard or whatever that you've built. And so, in a way, I had sets. It was like I had this, this ongoing saga. And it was really cool that I had these like doll houses to go around in. So my publisher saw this, and they were like, oh, wow, you've got all this great color art. You should really do another book. We should do a 4th book that has all this. And I said, but it's a trilogy. It can't have 4 books. And then they cited precedent. And so we're going to do sort of an art book that just has all this cool color art, which will come out in 2012, you'll be glad to hear. And of course, there's always fan art. I love the fan art. I've gotten lots of fan art of people draw Tally with her Planck, or they draw the Midnighters all the time. But when you do a book with art, you get more fan art. So I got these great Lego constructions of the. Did you know Lego had steampunk figures? They do. And here's the 4-legged walker in Legos. And I love this. It's basically Keith's style, but it's done in a much more. It's like Keith's work, but you can tell it's a slightly different hand. Of course, some people do, fan art, and they go completely in a different direction. This is, of course, Darren and Alec in manga style, and you can tell it's manga because it's windy. Anime and manga, it's got to be windy, so the hair and the scarves are moving. And this is the last. This was going to be the cover, interestingly enough. Keith was going to do a cover like this, and it's on the advanced reader's copy. And what I love about this illustration is it really shows what's going on with World War I. It's the war where technology takes over, where the machines win rather than human beings. Because before that, you could believe that you won the war because your guys were braver. But the problem with World War I is, if your guys have horses and swords and their guys have tanks, it doesn't matter how brave you are. The better machines win. And so I love this picture of Alec looking all fancy and with his old-fashioned cavalry saber and his pointy helmet, but behind him is the real power, this hulking machine, this monster made of metal. And that's the way, back then, when we saw the first tanks coming across the battlefield, I'm sure the German soldiers thought they were monsters. Because, of course, there's this huge thing, it's spitting fire, it's making a tremendous amount of noise, you shoot at it, you can't stop it, it crushes trees, it's like a monster. But of course, when you look at it, like 100 years later, when you look at those early tanks, it looks like something your little brother made. Because it's just a big boiler with treads on it, but to them it was a horrifying sight. And so I thought this is what's going on, is we're sort of bringing the horror that the people who were fighting that war back then felt, to you readers at home. Behemoth is the second book, and I'll talk quickly about it. What's cool about it is that they go to Istanbul, which is a neutral power. And one of the things we had done is that this is from Leviathan. This is like the back of Alex Stormwalker, and you can see it's very metal and hard and functional looking and has very hard edges. Whereas this is the desk of the Leviathan's captain, and you can see how smooth it is and how flowing and how sort of rounded and wooden it is and how soft. So we were making this war not just between two political powers, but between two different aesthetics. There was two different drawing styles. So when we get to Istanbul, Keith created a third drawing style, which is totally awesome, which is like metal, and you can see that's a mechanical elephant. So on the one hand, it's made of metal, it's a huge walker, just like the Germans use, but on the other hand, it looks like an animal. And that's a big lightning cannon, and but you can see the Leviathan next to the elephant. They almost look alike. So there's some sense that the people in Istanbul, the Ottoman Empire, could become Darwinists or they could become clankers. And we don't know which side of the war they're going to join, which is what the book is about. And this is I just put this in there because it's awesome. No, don't look at that. Now.